Get your face in the dirt now! Officer Grant Chambers didn't just scream the command, he weaponized it, his hand hovering over his holster while a terrified silence swept across the lawn of the most expensive estate in the city. In the center of the chaos, Kayla Anderson, a scholarship student who had never stolen a thing in her life, was on her knees, sobbing as champagne-soaked teenagers filmed her humiliation. Grant thought he was untouchable. He thought his badge was a crown, and his cruelty was the law. He thought this was just another nobody he could break for sport. But Grant Chambers made one fatal calculation error that night. He didn't know whose blood was running through Kayla's veins. He didn't know that the black SUV pulling into the driveway didn't carry backup. It carried the governor. And in about 5 minutes, the arrogant smirk on Grant's face was going to be replaced by a warm, wet stain spreading down the front of his trousers. This is the story of how a bully with a badge learned the true meaning of power. The invitation didn't look like a piece of paper. It looked like a threat wrapped in cream-colored linen and embossed with gold leaf. Kayla Anderson sat at the scratched wooden table of her small apartment kitchen, the heavy cardstock trembling slightly in her fingers. The late afternoon sun filtered through the singular window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, a sharp contrast to the world the invitation represented. The Chambers estate, Kayla read aloud, her voice barely a whisper. Annual summer solstice gala. Across the table, Piper Anderson, Kayla's mother, didn't look impressed. She looked terrified. Piper wiped her hands on a dish towel, her eyes scanning her daughter's face with the intensity of a bomb technician examining a live wire. "Kayla, baby, you know what those people are like," Piper said, her voice tight. "Grant Chambers, his father Caleb, that whole family thinks they own the oxygen in this town. Why would they invite you?" It was the question that had been gnawing at Kayla's stomach since she found the envelope slipped into her locker at the university. Kayla was a ghost on campus, a law scholarship student who kept her head down, aced her exams, and avoided the wealthy cliques that treated the university like a country club. She was black, brilliant, and broke, a combination that usually made her invisible to people like the Chambers. "Maya gave it to me," Kayla admitted, placing the card down. Piper scoffed, a harsh sound. "Maya Kensington? The girl who tried to get you kicked off the debate team because you corrected her pronunciation of jurisprudence? Kayla, this is a trap." "I know it feels off, Mom," Kayla said, standing up and pacing the small linoleum floor. "But Oliver Chambers is hosting it. He's in my ethics class. He's different. He actually talks to me. He said he wanted the smartest person in the class to be there to balance out the stupidity." Kayla wanted to believe it. She wanted to believe that for one night, she could step into that world of shimmering lights and easy laughter. But there was a deeper, more dangerous reason she wanted to go. A secret she kept locked in the deepest vault of her heart. She knew Governor Alexander Dalton was going to be there. Kayla had never met him, not officially. But she had a letter, yellowed with age, hidden under her mattress. A letter from 18 years ago, written by a young, ambitious politician to Piper Anderson, apologizing for a love that couldn't survive the brutal optics of an election year. Kayla didn't want money. She didn't want fame. She just wanted to see him, to stand in the same room and see if he looked like her. "I have to go, Mom," Kayla said, her resolve hardening. "If I want that internship at the firm next semester, I need to network. These people, as much as we hate it, they hold the keys." Piper sighed, the fight draining out of her. Out. She walked over and cupped Kayla's face. "You have your father's eyes, you know, but you have my spirit. Just promise me one thing. If Grant Chambers is there, you stay away from him. That man isn't a police officer. He's a predator with a license." "I promise," Kayla said. The next evening, the preparation was a battle against insecurity. Kayla didn't have designer gowns or diamonds. She wore a simple, elegant emerald green slip dress she had found at a thrift store and tailored herself. It hugged her frame perfectly, the color popping against her deep, radiant skin. She pulled her curls back into a sleek bun and applied a coat of red lipstick that Piper said looked like war paint. "You look like a queen," Piper whispered as Kayla headed for the door. "Don't let them make you feel like a servant." As Kayla took the bus to the edge of the wealthy district and walked the final mile to the Chambers estate, the air grew cooler, smelling of manicured jasmine and money. She checked her phone. A text from Oliver Chambers. "Glad you're coming. Look for me near the fountain. Ignore my cousin Grant if you see him. He's on a tear tonight." Kayla felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the evening breeze. She told herself she was just going to network, maybe catch a glimpse of the governor and leave. She had no idea that Maya Kensington was currently standing in front of a vanity mirror in one of the estate's guest rooms, holding a $50,000 diamond tennis bracelet and smiling a smile that didn't reach her cold, dead eyes. "Is everything ready?" Maya asked into her phone. On the other end, Grant Chambers, standing on the balcony overlooking the party with a scotch in one hand and his service weapon heavy on his hip, laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. "Just get her here," Grant said. "I've been itching for a reason to put someone in their place all week. Tonight's gonna be fun." The Chambers estate was not a house. It was a fortress of ego. Marble columns rose like bleached bones against the twilight sky, and the lawn was a sea of designer tuxedos and silk gowns. A string quartet played somewhere in the distance, but it was drowned out by the thumping bass of a DJ set up near the Olympic-sized infinity pool. Kayla felt the eyes on her the moment she stepped through the wrought iron gates. She presented her invitation to security, private contractors who looked more like mercenaries, and walked into the fray. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of expensive cigars and heavy perfume. "Kayla, you actually came!" Kayla turned to see Oliver Chambers weaving through the crowd. He looked nothing like his cousin Grant. Oliver was slim, with nervous energy and a suit that seemed slightly too big for him, despite likely costing more than Kayla's tuition. He held a crystal flute of champagne, and his eyes were already glassy. "Oliver," Kayla smiled, grateful for a friendly face. "It's quite a setup." "It's a circus," Oliver muttered, guiding her away from a group of women who were openly staring at Kayla's dress with judgmental sneers. "My Uncle Caleb insists on these things. Says it's good for the family image. Speaking of which," Oliver lowered his voice, "Grant is prowling. He's security tonight, which basically means he gets to carry his gun while drinking top-shelf bourbon and harassing the catering staff." Kayla scanned the perimeter. She saw him. Grant Chambers was leaning against a pillar near the bar, his police uniform tight across his bulky chest, badge gleaming under the patio lights. He wasn't on duty, but he was wearing the uniform. It was a power move, a signal. He was talking to Maya Kensington, who looked radiant and venomous in silver sequins. As if sensing her gaze, Grant looked up, his eyes locked onto Kayla. He didn't blink. He didn't smile. He just stared with a predatory intensity that made Kayla's stomach turn to ice. He whispered something to Maya, who laughed and touched his arm. "Come on," Oliver said, pulling Kayla's attention back. "Let me introduce you to some people from the firm. You wanted that internship, right?" For an hour, things went surprisingly well. Kayla's intelligence was her armor. She charmed a senior partner from a top law firm with her knowledge of constitutional law, making Oliver beam with pride. She allowed herself to relax, sipping a sparkling water, thinking maybe her mother was wrong. Maybe she could belong here. Then, the atmosphere shifted. A ripple of excitement moved through the crowd near the main entrance. A convoy of black SUVs was rolling up the long driveway. "The governor," someone whispered. "Dalton is here." Kayla's heart hammered against her ribs. She moved toward the edge of the terrace, trying to get a better view. She saw him step out of the car. Alexander Dalton looked exactly like he did on TV. Tall, silver-haired, with a jawline that suggested unshakable integrity. He was shaking hands, smiling that perfect politician smile. Beside him was his wife, Lila Noble, looking effortlessly chic. Kayla felt a pang of longing so sharp it almost brought her to her knees. "That's him," she thought. "That's my father." She took a step forward, drawn by an invisible thread. Suddenly, a body slammed into her. "Watch it, trash!" Kayla stumbled, catching herself on a high-top table. Red wine splashed down the front of her emerald dress. She looked up to see Maya Kensington standing there, an empty wine glass in her hand and a look of mock horror on her face. "Oh my God!" Maya gasped, loudly enough for the surrounding groups to hear. "Kayla! Look what you made me do! That was a vintage Merlot!" You bumped into me," Kayla stammered, grabbing a napkin to dab at the ruin of her dress. "I bumped into you?" Maya's voice pitched up shrill and accusing. "You were rushing toward the governor like a groupie. God, do you have no class?" "Is there a problem here?" The voice was deep, gravelly, and slurred. Grant Chambers stepped out of the shadows. He loomed over Kayla, smelling of whiskey and aggression. "No problem, Grant," Maya said, her eyes gleaming. "Just Kayla being clumsy. I'm going to go clean up." Maya brushed past Kayla, and as she did, Kayla felt a strange, subtle tug on the side of her tote bag. It happened in a split second, a heavy, metallic weight sliding into the open pocket of her canvas bag. Kayla didn't register it. She was too busy staring at Grant. "You don't belong here," Grant sneered, stepping into her personal space. He was so close she could see the burst blood vessels in his eyes. "I saw your name on the list, Oliver's charity case. Let me give you a tip, sweetheart. Finish your drink, turn around, and walk out that gate. Before things get complicated." "I was invited," Kayla said, her voice shaking but her chin high. "I have every right to be here." Grant laughed. He looked around at the crowd, inviting them to join the joke. "Rights? You think you have rights in my house? You have privileges, and I'm revoking them." "Grant, leave her alone," Oliver interjected, looking pale. "She's my guest." Grant shoved Oliver hard. The younger man stumbled back, nearly dropping his glass. "Shut up, Ollie. Go count the silverware. I'm handling security." Kayla backed away. "I'm leaving," she said. The night was ruined. She wouldn't get to meet the governor. She just wanted to escape before she cried. "Smart choice," Grant mocked. Kayla turned and walked briskly toward the exit, her head down, tears stinging her eyes. She just wanted to get to the bus stop. She just wanted to go home. She was 10 feet from the gate when the music cut out abruptly. "Stop her!" Maya's scream tore through the night air like a siren. Kayla froze. She turned around. Maya was standing on the elevated terrace, pointing a manicured finger directly at Kayla. "She stole it!" Maya shrieked, acting her heart out. "My diamond bracelet! I took it off to wash the wine off my hands in the bathroom, and she was the only one in there. She took it!" Every head at the party turned toward Kayla, 300 pairs of eyes. "I didn't," Kayla whispered, panic seizing her throat. "I didn't go to the bathroom." "Detailed search!" Grant roared, his hand flying to his baton. "Nobody leaves! Suspect is at the gate!" Grant began to run toward her. He wasn't running like a man doing a job. He was running like a wolf closing in on a wounded deer. The gravel of the driveway crunched under Grant's heavy boots as he closed the distance. Kayla instinctively took a step back, her hands raising in a universal gesture of surrender. "I didn't take anything," she cried out, her voice cracking. "You can search me, I swear." "You're damn right I'm going to search you," Grant growled. He didn't ask her to stop. He didn't ask for ID. He tackled her. It was excessive, brutal, and entirely for show. Grant hit her with the force of a linebacker, slamming Kayla into the manicured grass. The air left her lungs in a painful whoosh. Her tote bag flew from her shoulder, skidding across the lawn. Don't resist! Stop resisting! Grant screamed for the benefit of the crowd, driving his knee into the small of her back. I'm not resisting, Kayla sobbed, her face pressed into the dirt. Please, you're hurting me. Shut up! Grant grabbed her wrist and twisted it behind her back with enough force to strain the ligaments. He enjoyed the sound of her cry. He pulled a pair of zip ties from his tactical belt. He didn't even use standard cuffs. He treated her like a rioter. He cinched the plastic tight, biting into her skin. The partygoers had formed a semicircle. Phones were out. Flashes were popping. Nobody stepped in. The bystander effect was in full swing, amplified by the fear of the Chambers family. Even Oliver stood frozen by the punch bowl, looking sick but doing nothing. Get up! Grant hauled her to her feet by her arm, dragging her like a rag doll back toward the center of the patio, where the lighting was brightest. He wanted an audience. Please, Kayla begged, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the dirt. Check the cameras. I didn't do it. We don't need cameras when we have probable cause, Grant spat. He kicked her tote bag over to where they were standing. Let's see what the little rat scurried away with. He grabbed the bottom of the canvas bag and dumped the contents onto the pristine white tablecloth of a nearby buffet table. Textbooks, cheap pens, a bus pass, a crumpled tissue, and a shimmering coil of diamonds. The crowd gasped. It was a collective damning sound. Well, 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 Grant smirked, holding up the bracelet. The diamonds caught the light, sparkling mockingly. What's this? Did this fall from the sky? I've never seen that before, Kayla screamed, her desperation mounting. She put it there! Maya put it there! Maya stepped forward, clutching her chest, feigning distress. How could you? After Oliver was so nice to you. You people are all the same. You just take whatever you want. That's enough, Grant barked. He turned back to Kayla. You're under arrest for grand larceny, and since you want to accuse honest citizens of framing you, let's add resisting arrest and disorderly conduct. I want a lawyer, Kayla said, trying to summon the strength of her law studies. You have to read me my rights. Grant laughed, a low, menacing rumble. He leaned in close to her ear. Rights are for people who matter, sweetheart. Tonight, you're just garbage I'm taking out. He shoved her down onto her knees again. Stay there, like the dog you are. It was a display of dominance. Grant looked around the party, soaking in the fear and respect he thought he saw in their eyes. He felt like a king. He unbuttoned the top of his uniform shirt slightly, sweating from the exertion and the adrenaline. Someone call the precinct, Grant shouted to the crowd. Tell them I have a 10 to 15 in custody, and tell my dad to get down here. We're going to make an example out of this one. Kayla looked at the ground. Her spirit was breaking. The humiliation was a physical weight, heavier than the knee Grant had put in her back. She saw the shoes of the wealthy patrons inches from her face. Gucci, Prada, Louboutin, and her own scuffed sneakers. Mom was right, she thought. I'm nothing to them. The crowd parted suddenly near the main house. The hushed whispers turned into a respectful silence. What is going on here? The voice was authoritative, calm, but laced with an undercurrent of steel. Grant straightened up, puffing out his chest. He turned to face the newcomer, a wide, arrogant grin plastered on his face. He wanted the governor to see this. He wanted Alexander Dalton to see how efficiently the Chambers family kept the riffraff in line. Governor Alexander Dalton stood 10 feet away, flanked by 2 state troopers. His blue eyes took in the scene, the weeping girl on her knees, the overturned bag, the smug cop, and the terrified crowd. Governor! Grant boomed, stepping forward, hooking his thumbs into his belt. Just doing a little housekeeping. Caught a thief trying to make off with Maya Kensington's diamonds. Caught her red-handed. Grant gestured dismissively toward Kayla, who was still looking at the ground, her shoulders shaking. She was resisting. Grant lied smoothly. Had to subdue her. She's dangerous. Governor Dalton didn't look at Grant. He was looking at the girl. He was looking at the way her hair curled at the nape of her neck. He was looking at the terrified posture that struck a chord of ancient, buried memory. "Lift your head, child," Dalton said softly. It wasn't a request. Kayla froze. She knew that voice. She slowly lifted her chin, her tear-stained face meeting the governor's gaze. Her eyes, amber flecked with green, a rare, distinctive combination, locked with his. The color drained from Alexander Dalton's face. The world stopped spinning. He looked from her eyes to the distinctive birthmark on her collarbone, visible above the neckline of the torn emerald dress. Grant didn't notice the governor's reaction. He was too busy gloating. "I'm gonna haul her down to county myself. Make sure she gets the special treatment. You know how these scholarship kids are. Give them an inch and they take a..." Silence. The word was whispered, but it hit Grant like a slap. Dalton took a step forward. His hands were shaking. Not with fear, but with a rage so profound it threatened to burn the estate to the ground. He looked at the zip ties cutting into Kayla's wrists. He looked at the dirt on her cheek. Then he looked at Grant Chambers. And for the first time in his life, Grant felt true fear. It wasn't the fear of a fight. It was the fear of a prey animal realizing it had just walked into the cage of a starving lion. "Take those cuffs off her," Dalton said. His voice was terrifyingly quiet. "Excuse me?" Grant blinked, confused. "Sir, this is a crime scene. She's a criminal. My dad..." "I said," Dalton roared, his voice cracking like thunder, making half the guests jump, "take the cuffs off her." Grant stumbled back, his hands fumbling. "Governor, I don't think you understand the situation. She stole..." "I understand perfectly," Dalton said, walking past Grant and kneeling in the dirt beside Kayla. He didn't care about his $5,000 suit. He reached out, his hand hovering gently near her face. "Kayla," Dalton whispered. Kayla sobbed, a fresh wave of tears releasing. "I didn't do it, I promise." "I know," Dalton said. He looked up at Grant, his eyes burning with a hellfire intensity. "You put your hands on her," Dalton said, rising to his full height. He turned to face Grant, pointing a finger at his own chest. "You humiliated her. You hurt her." "She's just some thief!" Grant yelled, trying to regain control, his voice cracking. "Why do you care?" Dalton stepped into Grant's space. The governor was an inch shorter, but he towered over the cop. "Because," Dalton said, his voice echoing across the silent lawn, ensuring every camera, every witness, and every soul heard him. "That is not a thief. That is not a nobody." Dalton grabbed Grant by the collar of his uniform, pulling him down to eye level. "That's my daughter." The silence that followed Governor Alexander Dalton's declaration was heavier than the marble columns holding up the Chambers estate. It wasn't just quiet, it was a vacuum. The air seemed to have been sucked out of the patio, leaving 300 guests gasping in a collective state of shock. "That's my daughter." The words hung in the humid night air, echoing off the surface of the infinity pool. Grant Chambers stood frozen. His hand was still gripping the collar of his uniform shirt where the governor had released him, as if trying to hold his own reality together. His brain, wired for aggression and entitlement, simply could not process the input. He looked at the weeping girl in the dirt, the girl he had called garbage, the girl he had treated like an animal, and then he looked at the most powerful man in the state. "That's..." Grant started, his voice a pathetic squeak compared to his earlier roar. He laughed, a nervous, jagged sound that grated on everyone's ears. "That's a good one, Governor. You're joking, right? I mean, look at her." Grant gestured to Kayla with a trembling hand. It was the final nail in his coffin. The implication was clear, racist, and vile. Someone like her couldn't possibly come from someone like you. Governor Dalton didn't strike him. He didn't need to. He simply stared at Grant with a look of such profound, icy disgust that it felt like a physical blow. "Trooper," Dalton said, not taking his eyes off Grant. "Cut those ties! Now!" One of the state troopers, a towering man who looked like he chewed granite for breakfast, stepped forward. He moved with a speed and precision that made Grant's earlier movements look clumsy. In one fluid motion, he produced a pair of shears and snipped the plastic zip ties from Kayla's wrists. Kayla gasped as the pressure released, blood rushing back into her hands. She slumped forward, and Dalton was there instantly, catching her. He didn't care about the mud staining his bespoke trousers. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into his chest. It was the first time Kayla had ever been held by her father. She smelled sandalwood and expensive starch, a scent she had imagined for 18 years. "I've got you," Dalton whispered into her hair, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry, Kayla. I'm so sorry." "He hurt me," Kayla sobbed, the trauma of the last 20 minutes breaking through her shock. "He threw me down. He wouldn't listen." "I know," Dalton said, and the temperature in his eyes dropped to absolute 0. He stood up, helping Kayla to her feet. He kept one protective arm around her shoulders, turning to face the crowd. The guests, who had been so eager to film Kayla's downfall, were now paralyzed. Phones were still recording, but the lenses had shifted. They were no longer pointed at the thief, they were pointed at the bully. Maya Kensington was trying to make herself invisible. She had backed away from the center of the patio, her face the color of ash. She tried to slip behind a waiter carrying a tray of untouched hors d'oeuvres, but the crowd was too dense. She was trapped in the cage she had helped build. Grant was shaking his head, his eyes darting around wildly. The adrenaline that had made him feel like a god was now curdling into toxic fear. "Governor, listen, she had the bracelet. You saw it. It was in her bag. I was just doing my job. The law applies to everyone, doesn't it?" "The law?" Dalton stepped toward Grant, leaving Kayla momentarily with the state trooper. "You dare speak to me about the law? You didn't conduct an investigation, Officer Chambers. You conducted a lynching." Dalton pointed to the security cameras mounted on the eaves of the mansion. "This is the Chambers estate," Dalton said, his voice projecting clearly. "I know for a fact that this property has state-of-the-art surveillance, high-definition, night vision, audio." Grant's face went slack. He knew. He knew exactly what those cameras would show. They would show Maya slipping the bracelet into the bag. They would show Grant's unnecessary force. They would show the truth. We can check the tapes," Grant stammered, sweat pouring down his forehead. But right now, the evidence, Dalton interrupted, is that you assaulted a young woman based on the word of a known socialite without a shred of due process. You profiled her. You abused your authority. And you did it all while wearing that uniform." Dalton stepped closer. He was inside Grant's personal space now, invading it just as Grant had invaded Kayla's. "You like to feel big, don't you, son?" Dalton asked softly. "You like to make people feel small. You like to put your knee in their back." I... Grant couldn't speak. His throat had closed up. "Well, look around," Dalton commanded, sweeping his arm toward the silent, judging crowd. "You have your audience, but they aren't applauding anymore." Grant looked. He saw Oliver Chambers, his cousin, staring at him with a mixture of pity and revulsion. He saw the girls he had tried to impress looking at him like he was a disease. He saw the entire facade of his life, the tough guy, the hero, the untouchable Chambers heir, crumbling into dust. And then he saw the state troopers. They weren't standing at ease. Their hands were resting on their holstered weapons. They were looking at Grant not as a fellow officer, but as a threat. "Trooper," Dalton barked. "Secure his weapon." Grant's eyes widened. "What? No, you can't. I'm a police officer." "Not right now, you're not," Dalton said. "Right now, you are a suspect in an aggravated assault case. Disarm him." For a police officer, their service weapon is more than a tool. It is a symbol. It is the weight of the state on their hip. It is the physical manifestation of their power to give orders and expect obedience. To have it taken away, especially in public, is a castration. The lead trooper, whose name tag read Mercer, stepped forward. He was older than Grant, with eyes that had seen things Grant only pretended to understand. "Hands where I can see them, Chambers," Mercer said calmly. "You can't do this," Grant pleaded, backing up until his heels hit the stone rim of the fountain. "My dad is the chief. You touch me and he'll bury you." "Hands," Mercer repeated, unlatching his own holster strap. Grant hesitated. For a split second, a suicidal thought flashed through his panic-stricken mind. Reach for it. But the survival instinct was stronger. Slowly, trembling violently, Grant raised his hands above his head. Mercer moved in. With practiced efficiency, he reached for Grant's belt. He unsnapped the retention hood of Grant's holster. The sound, a sharp click, was magnified in the silence. Mercer pulled the heavy Glock 17 from its casing. He ejected the magazine, racked the slide to clear the chamber, and caught the unspent round as it spun through the air. He handed the weapon to his partner and then turned back to Grant. "Turn around," Mercer ordered. "Hands on the fountain." "You're not arresting me?" Grant whimpered. "Please, not here, not in front of them." "You didn't give her that courtesy." Dalton's voice cut through the air from where he stood with Kayla. Mercer spun Grant around and kicked his legs apart. He patted him down hard. He took the baton. He took the pepper spray. He took the handcuffs, the same ones Grant had used on Kayla. Grant was stripped bare. He was just a man in a polyester shirt, panting against cold stone. And that was when the fear truly hit him. It wasn't just anxiety anymore. It was a primal, biological terror. He realized that the governor wasn't just going to fire him. Dalton was going to destroy him. He was going to prison. He, Grant Chambers, the Golden Boy, was going to be locked in a cage with the very people he had tormented for years. The thought hit his nervous system like a sledgehammer. His control snapped. It started as a warmth spreading through his groin, uncontrollable and humiliating. He tried to clench, to stop it, but his body had betrayed him. The dark stain blossomed on the front of his light gray tactical trousers. It spread rapidly, soaking the fabric, dripping down his inner thigh. A girl in the front row, one of the teenagers who had been laughing earlier, pointed. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice carrying in the dead silence. "He pissed himself." Grant squeezed his eyes shut. He wished the ground would open up and swallow him whole. He wished he was dead. The warmth turned cold as the night air hit the wet fabric. A ripple of nervous, shocked laughter moved through the crowd. It wasn't the boisterous laughter of a party. It was the cruel, incredulous laughter of people witnessing the total degradation of a tyrant. "Look at him," someone muttered. "Tough guy." Grant sobbed. It was a broken, pathetic sound. He was standing in a puddle of his own urine, disarmed, detained, and destroyed. Governor Dalton watched the scene with a stony expression. He felt no triumph, only a grim satisfaction. He walked over to where Grant was slumped against the fountain. "Lift your head," Dalton said, echoing the command he had given Kayla. Grant couldn't do it. He shook his head, tears dripping off his nose. "Look at me," Dalton roared. Grant forced his head up. His face was a mask of snot and tears. He looked like a toddler. "You wanted to be a big man," Dalton said quietly, his voice laced with contempt. "You wanted to show everyone how powerful you are. Well, Grant, I think you've shown us exactly what you are." Dalton turned his back on him. He walked back to Kayla, who was watching the scene with wide, disbelief-filled eyes. She didn't feel happy. She felt relieved. The monster wasn't a monster anymore. He was just a pathetic man who had wet his pants. "Are you okay?" Dalton asked her, taking her hands. "I need to get you out of here, but not before I finish this." "Finish what?" Kayla asked. "The route. Dalton said darkly. "You don't get a weed like him without a root system." As if on cue, the sound of sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. But these weren't the standard police sirens. These were the heavy, distinct air horns of the department's command vehicle. Grant's head snapped up. Hope, desperate and foolish, flickered in his eyes. "Dad," he whispered. Chief Caleb Chambers didn't walk. He marched. He was a bull of a man, wider than Grant, with a neck that disappeared into the collar of his dress uniform. He had been at a fundraiser across town when the call came in, not from Grant, but from his paid informants at the party security detail. Grant messed up. Governor involved. Come now. Caleb burst through the garden gates, flanked by two of his own lieutenants. He took in the scene instantly. The silent crowd, the state troopers, the weeping girl, and his son, disarmed and humiliated against the fountain. Caleb's face turned a shade of purple that suggested impending cardiac arrest. He ignored the governor. He ignored Kayla. He marched straight toward Mercer. "What the hell is going on here?" Caleb bellowed. "Get your hands off my officer. Who gave you the authority to disarm a local law enforcement agent on private property?" Mercer didn't flinch. "Step back, Chief. This is an active crime scene." "Crime scene? This is my brother's house." Caleb turned to Grant. "Grant, get up. What the hell is the matter with you? Why are you crying like a—" Caleb stopped. He saw the stain on Grant's trousers. For a second, the chief of police looked like he might vomit. The shame was absolute. His son, the heir to his legacy, had wet himself in front of the city's elite. "Jesus Christ!" Caleb hissed. "Pull yourself together." "Chief Chambers." The voice came from behind him. Caleb turned slowly. He adjusted his mindset. He was good at this. He was good at spinning narratives, burying evidence, and making problems disappear. He put on his reasonable authority figure face. "Governor Dalton," Caleb said, nodding curtly. "I apologize for the disturbance. It seems there's been a misunderstanding. My son tells me he apprehended a thief. Emotions are running high. I'll take custody of the prisoner and the officer, and we can sort this out downtown away from the cameras." It was a masterful play. Take custody. Once Grant and Kayla were in his precinct, the tapes would disappear. The witness statements would be changed. Kayla would be charged, and Grant would get a commendation for bravery. "There will be no downtown," Dalton said, stepping between Caleb and Kayla. Caleb chuckled, a low, condescending sound. "With all due respect, Governor, jurisdiction here belongs to the city. You might run the state, but this is my town. I have a suspect to process." Caleb reached for his handcuffs, looking past Dalton to Kayla. "Girl, get over here. You've caused enough trouble for one night." Dalton didn't move. "If you take one more step toward her, Caleb, you will be joining your son in a cell." The threat hung in the air. Caleb's eyes narrowed. "Are you obstructing justice, Alexander? That's an impeachable offense. She stole a $50,000 bracelet. We have witnesses." "You have a setup," Dalton countered. "And you have a son who just committed assault, battery, false imprisonment, and civil rights violations under color of authority." "He was doing his job," Caleb yelled, losing his composure. "She's a criminal. She is my daughter." The revelation hit Caleb harder than it had hit Grant. Caleb Chambers knew everything about everyone in the city. That was how he kept power, but he didn't know this. He looked at Kayla. He looked at the governor. He did the math, the letter, the rumors from 18 years ago. His face went pale. "Your daughter?" Caleb whispered. "That's right," Dalton said, his voice ringing with righteous fury. "You invited her here. Your family lured her here. And then you let your son treat her like an animal." "I didn't know," Caleb stammered, his hands raising defensively. "Governor, I swear I didn't know. If you had known, you would have treated her with respect." Dalton cut him off. "That's the problem, Caleb. You only respect people you fear. You only respect power. Well, You're about to get a lesson in power." Dalton pulled his phone from his pocket. He dialed a number and put it on speaker. "Attorney General," Dalton said into the phone. "Yes, Governor?" The voice on the line was crisp and alert. "I am at the Chambers estate. I am declaring a state of emergency regarding the conduct of the local police department. I want the state police to seize the precinct immediately. I want all files secured. I want a forensic audit of every arrest Grant Chambers has ever made. And I want a warrant for the arrest of Caleb Chambers for conspiracy and obstruction of justice." "On it, sir." Caleb stumbled back, his world collapsing. "You can't do that. You can't seize my precinct." "I just did," Dalton said. "You've run this town like your personal fiefdom for 20 years, Caleb. You've covered up for your son. You've taken bribes. You've bullied the weak. Tonight the bill comes due." Dalton turned to the troopers. "Arrest him." "On what charge?" Caleb screamed as the troopers moved in. "We'll start with being an accessory to the assault of the governor's daughter," Dalton said coldly. "And we'll work our way down to the parking tickets." Caleb Chambers, the man who owned the city, was spun around and slammed against the same fountain as his son. As the cuffs clicked onto his wrists, he looked at Grant. Grant was still sobbing, staring at his wet pants. "You idiot!" Caleb spat at his son. "You ruined us! You ruined everything!" Dalton turned away from the destruction of the Chambers dynasty. He looked at Kayla. She was trembling, overwhelmed by the sudden explosion of events. "Let's go," Dalton said gently. "My car is waiting." "Wait," Kayla said. She wiped her eyes. She looked toward the crowd, scanning the faces until she found Maya Kensington. Maya was trying to hide behind a pillar. "Her," Kayla said, pointing. Dalton followed her finger. "Trooper Mercer." "Yes, Governor." "Ms. Kensington seems to be leaving," Dalton said. "Please ensure she stays. I believe she has intimate knowledge of the location of the stolen property. She'll need to give a statement, under oath." Maya let out a shrill cry as a trooper blocked her path. Kayla took a deep breath. She looked at Grant one last time. He looked small. He looked wet. He looked nothing like the monster who had terrified her. "I'm ready," Kayla said. Dalton guided her toward the black SUVs. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, silence reigning supreme. As the car door closed, shutting out the noise and the lights of the party, Kayla leaned her head back against the leather seat. "Did you mean it?" she asked quietly. "Mean what?" Dalton asked, signaling the driver to move. "That I'm your daughter." Dalton reached across the console and took her hand. "Kayla, I wrote a letter to your mother 18 years ago. I've regretted sending it every day since. I've watched you from afar. I've seen your grades. I've seen your strength. Tonight was the first time I was brave enough to claim you, and I am never letting you go again." As the convoy rolled down the driveway, leaving the flashing lights and the ruined party behind, Kayla finally allowed herself to cry. But they weren't tears of humiliation anymore. They were tears of release. Back at the fountain, Grant Chambers sat in his own filth, watching the taillights fade. He realized with a sickening clarity that his life was over, but he didn't know the half of it. The internet was already uploading the videos. The world was about to see the puddle, and the inmates at the state penitentiary were about to get a new plaything. The fallout wasn't just a scandal, it was an exorcism. 3 days after the Solstice Gala, the city was unrecognizable. The state police, under the direct orders of the Attorney General, had turned the local precinct inside out. It wasn't just a raid, it was an occupation. Trooper Una Mercer sat at the desk that had belonged to Grant Chambers. It was a chaotic mess of paperwork, but the real evidence wasn't on the desk. It was in the locked drawer that Mercer had just pried open with a crowbar. "You need to see this," Mercer said, his voice flat. His partner, a younger trooper named Alvarez, walked over. Inside the drawer wasn't just standard police gear. It was a collection of trophies. Cheap jewelry, confiscated IDs, cell phones that had never been logged into evidence, and a notebook. "What is it?" Alvarez asked. "It's a ledger," Mercer said, flipping through the pages. "Grant didn't just target Kayla. He's been targeting scholarship students, service workers, anyone he thought wouldn't fight back for years. He's got names, dates, and confiscated assets." Mercer slammed the book shut. He was shaking them down, pulling them over for broken taillights that weren't broken, threatening them with arrest unless they paid up or gave him what he wanted. He wasn't a cop. He was a highwayman with a pension. Meanwhile, across town, Grant Chambers was sitting in an isolation cell at the county jail. He wasn't in isolation for his protection. He was there because the warden didn't want a riot. The video of Grant wetting himself at the fountain had gone viral globally. It had 50 million views in 48 hours. Hashtag #PeePantsOfficer was the #1 trending topic on every platform. Grant sat on the metal cot, staring at the wall. He had been stripped of his uniform. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too small. Every time a guard walked past, they snickered. "Hey, Chambers," a guard called out, rapping his baton on the bars. "You need a diaper change, boss?" Grant didn't respond. He couldn't. The arrogance that had fueled him for 25 years had evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, trembling shell. He kept waiting for his dad to walk in. He kept waiting for Caleb to fix it. But Caleb Chambers was currently in the cell block adjacent to him, screaming at his court-appointed attorney. The Chambers dynasty wasn't just crumbling, it was being demolished brick by brick. The governor wasn't finished. Alexander Dalton had set up a temporary command center at the state capitol. Kayla was there, sitting in a plush leather chair, watching the news coverage on a massive screen. She looked different. She was wearing a tailored navy blazer, her hair natural and free. She didn't look like a victim anymore. "Are you sure you want to go through with the testimony?" Dalton asked, placing a cup of tea in front of her. "We have enough physical evidence to bury them. You don't have to face them again." Kayla took the tea, her hands steady. "No, I want to. I want to look him in the eye when he realizes he lost. Not because of who my father is, but because of what he did." Dalton smiled, a genuine expression of pride. "That's my girl." The interrogation room was cold, sterile, and smelled of stale coffee and fear. Maya Kensington sat on the metal chair, looking like a porcelain doll that had been dropped on concrete. Her designer dress was wrinkled, her makeup was smeared, and she had been crying for 6 hours. Trooper Mercer walked in, carrying a thick file. He didn't sit down. He just threw a plastic bag onto the table. Inside was the diamond bracelet. "We found your prints on the clasp," Mercer said, "and we found Kayla's prints. Nowhere on it. Not a smudge." I might have been mistaken," Maya stammered, her voice thin and reedy. "Maybe it fell into her bag. It was a chaotic night." "Chaotic?" Mercer leaned in. "We have the security footage, Maya. We have 4K video of you standing behind Kayla, looking around to see if anyone was watching, and dropping the bracelet into her tote bag. You looked right at the camera and smiled." Maya's face went white. "It was a joke! It was just a prank! Grant said it would be funny to scare her a little." "Funny?" Mercer opened the file. "Grant Chambers is facing 20 years for kidnapping, assault, and corruption. You are looking at 5 to 10 for filing a false police report, conspiracy to commit a felony, and perjury." "5 years," Maya shrieked. "I can't go to prison. I have a life. I'm an influencer." "Not anymore," Mercer said coldly. "But you have one card to play. We know this wasn't just a spontaneous prank. We know Grant planned this. We found texts on his phone referencing the takedown 2 days before the party. We need you to confirm it. We need you to tell us exactly what he said." Maya didn't hesitate. In that moment, loyalty to the Chambers family meant nothing compared to self-preservation. She cracked. "He told me to do it," Maya blurted out, tears streaming down her face. "He said he hated how Oliver brought trash into the house. He said he wanted to make an example of her so no other people like her would think they belonged there. He told me to plant the bracelet. He said he'd handle the rest. He said his dad would make the charges stick. Mercer nodded to the mirror. The camera was recording. He called it pest control, Maya sobbed. He's a monster. I was just afraid of him. You have to believe me. We believe you were an accomplice, Mercer said, gathering the files. But your testimony just nailed the lid on his coffin. Enjoy your stay, Miss Kensington. Maya screamed as they led her away, but nobody was listening. The circle was complete. The trap Grant had set for Kayla had snapped shut around his own neck. The trial of Grant and Caleb Chambers was the most watched legal event in the state's history. It took 6 months to get there. 6 months of discoveries, forensic audits, and a parade of victims coming forward once they realized the Chambers family could no longer hurt them. The courtroom was packed. Every seat was taken. Outside, a crowd of thousands chanted Kayla's name. Grant sat at the defense table. He had lost 40 pounds. He looked skeletal. His eyes were dead. Caleb sat next to him, aged 10 years, his bull neck shrunken and loose. Kayla took the stand on the final day. She wore emerald green, the same color she had worn that night. It was a power move, a reclamation. Ms. Anderson, the prosecutor asked, can you tell the court how you felt when the defendant, Grant Chambers, knelt on your back? Kayla looked directly at Grant. He couldn't meet her eyes. He looked down at his hands. I felt like I was dying, Kayla said, her voice clear and ringing through the silence. I felt like my life, my future, my humanity meant nothing to him. He didn't see a person. He saw a target. She paused, taking a breath. But I also felt something else, she continued. I felt pity, because a man who needs to hurt others to feel powerful is the weakest thing on earth. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. The verdict was read by a forewoman who glared at Grant with undisguised contempt. We find the defendant, Grant Chambers, guilty on all counts: assault, battery, false imprisonment, civil rights violations, conspiracy, extortion, and we find the defendant, Caleb Chambers, guilty on all counts: obstruction of justice, corruption, racketeering. The judge, a stern woman who had reviewed the trophy drawer evidence herself, peered over her glasses at the two men. Grant Chambers, she said, you took an oath to protect and serve. Instead, you prayed and destroyed. You are a disgrace to the uniform. I sentence you to 25 years in the state penitentiary with no possibility of parole for the first 15. A gasp went through the courtroom. It was a death sentence for a cop. And Caleb Chambers, she continued, you built a culture of corruption that allowed this rot to fester. You are sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. As the bailiffs moved in to cuff them, Grant finally looked up. He looked at the gallery. He saw the faces of the people he had tormented. He saw Oliver, who turned his back on him, and he saw Kayla standing next to her father, the governor. Grant opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to beg, perhaps to scream, but no sound came out. He was led away in silence, the clinking of chains the only eulogy for his life. The video of him being led away was played on the news that night. But nobody talked about his power anymore. They just talked about the stain 6 months later. The summer sun was warm on the campus lawn. Kayla sat on a bench, a thick law textbook open on her lap. She wasn't just a student anymore. She was a symbol. The Anderson Act, a new bill signed into law by Governor Dalton, provided strict oversight for local police departments and mandatory body cam transparency. Hey, Kayla looked up. Oliver Chambers was standing there. He looked lighter, unburdened. He had changed his last name to his mother's maiden name. He was just Oliver now. Hey, Kayla smiled. I just wanted to say, congratulations on the internship, Oliver said. Top of the class. Thank you, Kayla said. It helps when you have a good mentor. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, and Alexander Dalton waved. He wasn't surrounded by security. He was just a dad picking up his daughter for dinner. I have to go, Kayla said, closing her book. My dad is waiting. Kayla, Oliver said, stopping her. I'm sorry. For everything my family did. Kayla looked at him, then at the waiting car. She thought about the night in the dirt. She thought about the fear. But then she felt the warmth of the sun and the weight of the future in her hands. It's over, Oliver, she said softly. The trash has been taken out. She walked toward the car, her head held high, stepping into a life that was finally, truly hers. Grant Chambers thought his badge made him a god. He thought he could crush Kayla Anderson like an insect, but he learned the hard way that when you dig a grave for someone else, you better dig too. Kayla didn't just survive, she thrived. And Grant? Well, let's just say the laundry duty in prison is a fitting punishment for a man who can't keep his own pants dry. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice, smash that like button. It helps us expose more bullies. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in the governor's shoes? See you in the next video.